Hi, I'm Tom Zimmerman from the EMDR podcast. This episode is about flash-like approaches, the four blinks approach particularly, and it's some thoughts about both the active ingredients that may be involved in this approach and a little bit of thoughts about mechanism. Um, because I think there's still a very broad perception that this is a very strange way to do things. It's a strange way to help people interact with memories. And what I want to do is I want to talk about what may be active in this approach, what those active components may be doing. And I want to make the case that this is not something on the sidelines of trauma, but many of these things that are the active ingredients, many of these things that may be deeply involved in the mechanism, and why these approaches heal difficult memories so quickly. These things may be deeply implicated in healing humans generally. So let's get into that a little bit. But before we do, I want to be very clear about what flash-like approaches do. The four blinks approach particularly does when we practice it well. So, and I need to do this in almost every episode I do because there's so many misconceptions. And many of those misconceptions have their genesis in how this was understood, changes in how we understand it, and also some pretty deep confusion about how humans heal more broadly. I don't think there's a very broad consensus about what healing looks like and about what healing is, not just culturally, but even within the mental health professions. So from my perspective, these approaches are not just resources. This, as a matter of fact, this approach is not just a technique, but is in fact an approach to psychotherapy. I don't believe this is a brain hack. I believe that this pathway that we're on, that we access in these approaches, are very, very central to how humans may heal, possibly to how humans have healed. And I don't think these approaches are a lesser form of healing. It's not like some kind of lesser or inferior form of healing. And how do I know that? I know that because of what my clients tell me. What my clients tell me is that these approaches really can get you there. And by getting you there, what that means is these approaches help you transform a memory, completely and totally transform a memory, and move a memory from a hot activated experience into absolutely normal memory space. And it can do that in a shockingly short amount of time. So the core of these approaches involve activation and involve an experience that challenges the expectation that's in that bad memory. And that really should not be a surprise, because if we think about, let's don't think about culturally our instincts for what we need to heal or what we need to get past an event. Let's think in a very, very deep and fundamental way about how you've actually healed, when you've healed, what has been helpful in your healing. And my guess is that the kind of central line in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, probably the most quoted line in that book, is directly implicated in how you've healed, how you have gotten past difficult things, whether you've done that inside a therapy context or not. So van der Kolk says that we need to have experiences, really body-based experiential learning that deeply and viscerally contradicts the helplessness, rage, and collapse that resulted from the trauma. So my guess is that if you think about how you have healed, the relationships that have taught you that it can be okay to trust, if you think about how you have become more comfortable in your own skin, it's probably because you had experiential learning, which helped you deeply and viscerally contradict the helplessness, rage, and collapse that resulted from the trauma. And obviously, these things need to be presented. These experiences need to be presented in ways that are tolerable to the system and to the client's parts. And what I'm going to argue is that Flash does that. Flash approaches practiced well do that in a pretty compelling way. So one of the things I've tried to do in developing the four blinks approach is remove variables that are extraneous, that just simply may have been put in there for historical or for institutional or for purposes other than that are absolutely essential in the clients in for this approach to be effective. So one of my goals was, right, when I saw that there were scripts that involve bilateral, there's scripts that involve counting, right? There's scripts that may involve a lot of client talking, when there's scripts that involve all of these different things. Try to think about which of those, right, may be essential, which of those are important parts in this process. And even breathing. I mean, plenty of scripts have breathing built in. In my version, I don't. And there are very compelling reasons why. So I've never done Flash approaches using bilateral stimulation. And my clients clear their targets 97+% of the time. I've never done deep breathing when doing Flash approaches, and my clients still clear their targets 97+% of the time. I rarely do counting, any type of counting anymore, and my clients still clear their targets 97% of the time. So, so what I've tried to do is let's take out things that may not need to be in there. And then now let's look closely at what's left, okay? And really, I want to return very quickly back to the bilateral component, right? I believe that the bilateral component was put in there largely because Flash was developed by an EMDR therapist, and again, it's slow bilateral. It is not fast bilateral. So I don't believe there's a other compelling reason for Flash approaches to have bilateral stimulation. Now, some people will say, but wait a minute, I thought bilateral was an important part in disrupting working memory. We're kind of giving the client a task to do. And there may be some aspect there, but hold on, I want to get into a little bit why it makes sense maybe not to have bilateral in there, and why maybe bilateral doesn't need to be one of the things that are disrupting working memory. So let's look at what elements we can kind of think of as the most active of the active ingredients in Flash. And no doubt at the very, very beginning, there is activation, right? Phil Manfield's moving in a direction in which he wants to activate the memory so lightly we may not even be aware of what we're activating. But in the approach that I use, there is activation. We are pointing a laser at a very, very particular memory, and we're causing very, very light activation. So, and part of how we do that is we let the client know our goal is to lightly activate. We have very good strategies for doing that. We can open the door and close it. In fact, we can have a client go up to an actual door, open and close it, and peek in and tell us the one thing. What is it? What is it? The one thing that stands out when you open a door and close it? Oh, look, there's the dresser knob. Okay, good. Can you see that dresser knob kind of go into a container and get smaller and smaller? So there are ways that we can practice in an experiential way with very light activation when clients struggle with that. I'll have videos that will walk you through how to do that pretty quickly, pretty easily, and these strategies do tend to be helpful. So what is it? What is it about very light activation that seems to be an essential component? One of the things, it's hard to talk about activation without talking about the calm scene, because in every other psychotherapy, when we activate, let me back up, many other psychotherapies, when we activate a memory, what we notice is what we're activating, right? So activation and noticing are part of the same piece. In Flash approaches, they're not. If you want Flash not to work, notice what you activate. Notice what you activate. Sit with and notice deeply or notice at all what you activate, and Flash is going to come to a pretty screeching halt. So light activation lets us do something that is pretty remarkable, right? Because what it's doing is it's bringing that memory, it's selecting that memory, and very light activation. When you guide the client to open the door and close it, what we're actually processing isn't the memory. What we're processing is just one little slice or one little piece of the memory. So back here, if we kind of make this our memory, what we're processing, right, is just this little piece of it. Just this little piece of it right here, right now, whatever it is that's distressing right here, right now. And if that seems a little bit bizarre, I'm going to make the case this is what we do in every trauma therapy that is transformative. Even in EMDR, we don't process the whole memory. Even in EMDR, Dr. Shapiro guides us to go into the memory at the worst part, and there are other ways to do that too. Those of us that may use the videotape approach with complex trauma, what we're processing and what we're bringing into awareness isn't the whole memory. It's whatever slice right now has a little bit of activation. And that's what we're doing. We're not landing the whole fish in one tug. That is a recipe for a disaster. That is a recipe for way too much content coming into consciousness than we can possibly, that our nervous system can possibly digest. So we are working with tiny slices of the memory at a time. That's what light activation also helps you do. The container, which is an optional part of Flash, but it is something that I highly recommend with clients with complex trauma. The container gives that slice somewhere to go. It gives it somewhere to live, because then we can kind of push this out of awareness, and then we can do our entire noticing in the calm scene. We can spend all of our time noticing the calm scene. So again, what is essential in Flash-like approaches is to lightly activate a memory, push it out of your awareness, load up a calm scene, a calm process, a calm experience, and sit there and notice that. Okay, so what we're doing is that these really do need to be separated, and we do our noticing here. If they're not separated, what's happening? What's happening from a memory reconsolidation perspective? And in memory reconsolidation, two core things need to be happening. Number one, we need to activate a memory. And number two, we need to encourage the client to have an experience. Just like van der Kolk says, we need to encourage the client to have an experience that is disconfirming of the information that is in that bad memory. Well, guess what? If you activate a memory too much and you load up your calm scene, a lot of what you're experiencing may be a tiny bit of the calm scene, but maybe a whole lot of the bad memory. And the stuff in the bad memory, that's not disconfirming, that's confirming. And if it's in your body, that's confirming and it's polluting your calm scene. So in a lot of ways, what flash-like approaches do is they let you do memory reconsolidation work in a very quick, very rapid, and very explicit way. Activation, and notice something that disconfirms that memory. And if these are getting mixed up, we have a problem. And a lot of times when flash doesn't work, it's because the calm scene is being polluted by the bad memory, or we're not checking the body. We need to check the body to make sure that the client is having an experience. So the other thing that is really, really central in this approach is that our calm scene needs to be an experience. Okay, it can't just be something you're looking at or something that you're imagining. It needs to be something that evokes something in you. And that can be humor, that can be compassion, that can be tenderness, that can, if you're watching a video of someone petting a dog, that can induce an experience which is contradictory to the experience, the expectation that is in that bad memory. So again, what we're doing is what van der Kolk says. We're letting the body have an experience which deeply and viscerally contradicts the helplessness, rage, and collapse encoded into that memory. And what we're doing that is truly remarkable in flash is that we're lightly activating, we're pushing that activation. And again, we activate so that we bring something into working memory. And again, when we activate, what we're bringing into awareness and what we're bringing very briefly into focus is the right now slice of that. So again, little micro slices at a time are going into your container, getting pushed out of your awareness. And you know what would happen if we did flash-like approaches and we didn't blink at all? If you had this memory, pushed it out of awareness, and you just sat in your calm scene for 30 seconds at a time, do you know what would happen? The memory would still resolve. It would just resolve at a much, much slower rate. So there's something that is very, very important about the blinks. And the blinks, it's not neurobiological. There's nothing magical. This isn't like a twin or sister to eye movements in EMDR. What the blinks are doing is requiring, right? So if we're in this calm scene for 30 seconds, what we're doing is we're sitting with this calm scene for about 4-ish seconds, and then we're blinking. And then what do we need to do to blink? Blinking several times, we need to come into the present. We need to blank out that calm scene, and then we go right back in. Okay, so this is what's happening. This is what's happening in a typical flash session. Okay, we very quickly activate one little slice, put it in a container, push that container out of our awareness, load up the calm scene here. Okay, wait 4 or 5 seconds, blink it out, boom, we go right back into this calm scene, blink, calm scene. Wait a few seconds, oh, blink, right? We go right back into this calm scene. Do that several times, blink, calm scene, blink, blink, calm scene. So what are we doing when we're doing that? You can have an experience of 30 seconds in that calm scene, and that memory, often after a session or two, is going to clear. It just will. The blinks in the calm scene aren't inducing an experience once. These blinks we do every 5 seconds when the client is in the calm scene for about 30 seconds is they're going in and out of that calm scene 6 times. So if we are doing this for 30 minutes, we may be doing 40 of these episodes in the calm scene. And what that means is we're not going into the calm scene 40 times. It means we're going into the calm scene hundreds of times. And what flash-like approaches can teach us is that maybe it's not the actual sitting in the calm scene and really, soaking up the experience of the calm scene that really will move this memory rapidly, effectively into normal memory. Maybe, maybe it's the process of entering and going out, right? Maybe it's this calm, it's not. So again, don't think of this as the calm scene. Think of it as calm scene, calm scene, calm scene, calm scene, calm scene, right? So it's 6 different exposures. It's 6 different going into the calm scenes in every 30 seconds. So my hunch is that just like the memory, which we're getting kind of micro exposures to, the calm scene, we're also getting micro exposures to. So one of the things that's super important, back related to the experience, it's very important that we check in with the client's experience and make sure that in these little packets of time, they're able to go out and then find their way back into that calm scene. Because if they're not able to find their way back into that calm scene, or they're just starting to get in it, they're just starting to re-experience it, and we're saying blink, and they're not quite getting in, they're just kind of hopping along, at the kind of top of awareness, rather than letting that calm scene, we need to switch the calm scene into something that is more experientially salient, right? Something that is more, that they can find their way out of and into very quickly. That's why with really complex trauma, I like the calm scene to be a video that just plays for the 30 seconds that they're in it. And then the moment they're ready, they can just direct their attention right back into it. They don't have to build the sand. They don't have to build the sky. They don't have to build the palm trees, the seagulls, the smells, the sun, and do all of that in like 3.5 seconds before I'm saying blink again. So think about making sure that that calm scene is compelling and induces an experience so that the client's not having an experience. The client is having an experience, 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 experience. So there's also something that is important in this going out and shifting of awareness and shifting of focus. That is a key part in most psychotherapies that are effective and are transformative. And that's what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about are psychotherapies that are effective and transformative, that have the likelihood, if not the probability, of completely transforming one memory in one session. Okay. And what that involves are shifts of focus and shifts of temporal awareness. So what am I talking about there? Okay, so number 1, lightly activate, container, push it out of your awareness, load up your calm scene. Do you know what that is? That is a shift in space-time. That is a shift in focus. Okay, we bring the memory into awareness, and then we're sitting with a disconfirming experience. Okay, so we're not just sitting with the disconfirming experience. What are we doing? We're sitting here. And by the way, if the client's imagining this process, it may be dissociative, right? So they may be kind of over here imagining this experience, and then boom, they're present when they're blinking, and then they're right back into this calm scene. Present when they're blinking, because you need to be present to do this type of motor activity, and then we're right in the calm scene. Present, calm scene, present, calm scene. So these shifts of focus do kind of mirror what the client does even in EMDR. So you're like, what do you mean? How does this happen? Well, think about in EMDR, there is activation and then there's noticing, right? Activation and noticing are separate places of focus, separate places where we are attaching our gaze and attaching our concentration and awareness. And then what happens after the client spends 30 to 45 seconds noticing? What happens? There's a temporal shift, right? And why are they shifting from this inward experience into the present, roughly equivalent to the blinks? right? Why are they? Because you're in the present. The therapist is in the present. So even in many other forms of psychotherapy, there are these shifts of awareness, right, that happen. And Flash is just a different way to do that. Okay. So you put all this together and you have a pretty, on one hand, what you have is an explicit. I mean, if Flash approaches aren't grounded in memory reconsolidation, I don't know how we're making sense of it, right? You activate a memory and you encourage the client to have an experience that contradicts the expectation in that bad memory. If that's not what we're doing in Flash, I don't know what the heck Flash is. I don't know how we justify it, how we make sense of it. So my sense is that Flash does memory reconsolidation in incredibly interesting, incredibly rapid, and incredibly transformative ways. And what it can teach us more broadly is that a very general mismatch, right, an experience that has just a general experiential mismatch with the expectation in that bad memory is enough. Okay, so we don't have to construct, we don't have to spend weeks or months exploring the schema in this bad memory. We can just encourage the client to sit with and go in and out of something pleasant, and that's enough. Light activation is enough. That's what Flash teaches us over and over and over. Okay, going in and out of that calm scene, what that teaches us is that micro exposures to the calm scene, rather than sitting for an extended period in the calm scene, will move that memory faster, much faster than just sitting in. So what that seems to be teaching us is that it's not duration, and it may not even be, quality of the calm scene, but rather exposure to. And if we go back to van der Kolk's quote, doesn't that kind of make sense? What we need are body-based experiences that challenge the helplessness and collapse generated by the trauma. And if that's not what we're doing, I don't know what it is. We're just doing it in a much more explicit way than many of us are used to. So I'm hoping that what this is doing is letting you see that these approaches make sense. They make sense based on what we know about lab research in terms of memory reconsolidation, in terms of not just how humans heal, but how many organisms can change implicitly held information. So that's my take. That's my sense of what may be going on in Flash-like approaches, particularly in the 4 blinks approach. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas. And if you're struggling to do this, let me know. I'd love to help you, because this is incredibly, incredibly simple. And we may be making it way, way, way more complicated than it needs to be. And there's some problems that can come from that. So again, it is incredibly good news. I promise you, it is incredibly good news that we can lightly activate a memory, push it out of awareness, load up a calm scene, and go in and out of that calm scene. If you're thinking of Flash as something more complicated than that, you're overthinking it. It is no more complicated than that. Again, quickly activate a difficult memory, whatever it is in that slice that's difficult, put it in your container, push your container out of your awareness, sit with this calm scene a few seconds at a time, go in and out of it. It is no more complicated than that. So thanks for going on this journey. And thank you for all the really good work you do in the world. I would love to help you do this in more efficient, more reliable, more predictable ways. That's why I keep doing this, why I keep making these videos, is because we may be dramatically overthinking something incredibly, incredibly simple, and something that's just astronomically good news for us as therapists, for our clients, and for our species and all of the things, all of the accumulated wounding that we carry individually and collectively. So thank you. Check out FourBlinks, FOURBLINKS.com, where you can find a script, you can find video tutorials, you can find lots and lots of information about the intersection between flash-like approaches and memory reconsolidation, and be in touch. Thank you.